It is great to be here this afternoon at South by Southwest. For those of you that have traveled here to Austin, you've obviously found that there are a lot of friendly people. There's great food, terrific music, lots of cranes, tons of traffic, and of course a world-class university. And frankly, there's no place I'd rather be than in Austin during South by Southwest. Now, I'm not sure that reflects a lot of those folks who work downtown, but it is a great place to be. My wife, Georgianne, is somewhere here in the audience, and I told her that, if we showed up at South by Southwest, somehow this would, increase our cool factor with our kids. I'm not sure that's going to work either, honey, but we'll give it a shot. However, I believe my parents, were they still alive, would actually be very pleased. As many of you know, I'm relatively new to the world of higher education. I've been in the job about 2 years and 2 months. I know that compared to a lot of people in this room, and certainly a lot of people on today's program, that makes me kind of the new guy. On the other hand, I like to think that education is part of my DNA. My mother was an elementary school teacher. And so from a very young age, I understood the importance and the nobility of the teaching profession. My mother was one of my 2 heroes. The other was my father, who also taught me how important it was to get a good education. I remember when I was young, my dad said, son, I grew up in a small town in Missouri, and most of the fathers there owned the hardware store, or they owned used car salesmen, or they had something that they could pass on to their sons and daughters. He said, but when I joined the military, there wasn't anything I could pass on to you, so he was determined to pass on an education. And when he left college in 1940 to prepare to go off to war, he didn't have his degree. He was a World War II vet, spent 26 years in the Air Force. But when he left the military, he went back to school. And it wasn't easy. He had a job and a family to support, but he wanted that degree. When he finally got it, he decided he wasn't done. He went on to get his master's degree, all down in San Antonio. My parents passed on the torch of education to me, and I consider it a real blessing that I now have a chance to, kind of in my own small way, help pass the torch on to the next generation. In 1977, with my UT journalism degree in hand, I embarked on an adventure that became a 37-year career as a Navy SEAL that took me all around the world. Perhaps even more than my mom and dad, seeing the world taught me about education's power to transform society. A good education reduces fear, bigotry, racism, and inequality. It brings dignity and respect, hope and opportunities, and a belief in the future. During my last few years in the military, I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan fighting the Taliban. The Taliban hated education, particularly for women. One of the great things the Western powers did was to build schools for young ladies. I remember one of those schools in particular down in southern Afghanistan. It was a small 2-room building that the girls from all around the area would come to get an education. At one point, the Taliban were so upset at our efforts to educate the young ladies that they would come in at night and put landmines around the building. We were able to see from overhead surveillance, and every morning U.S. soldiers would come in and we'd clear out those landmines before the ladies would go to school. The Taliban understood the stakes. They understood that educating those girls was going to change everything. So every night they would slip in and put another mine in the ground. But the girls understood too, and they came back day after day, sometimes at great risk to themselves. They came back every day because they understood that education was their ticket to a better life. Eventually, the Taliban stopped their efforts, admittedly, with the help of the American soldier. I've seen children from Mali and Chad, Colombia and Peru, the Philippines and Indonesia overcome every obstacle in their path just to go to a 1-room shack so they could get an education. Everywhere I have been in the world, I've seen kids willing to overcome any obstacle just to attend school. But I think kids and parents all over the world understand that in fighting for an education, they are fighting for their lives, for their future. As I've made the transition from the military to higher education, a lot of people have asked me about the differences. I think they're often surprised when I tell them that there really isn't much of a difference. In my last job as the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, I had 12 subordinate commands, leading about 69,000 men and women all over the world. As the Chancellor of the University of Texas System, I have 14 academic and health institutions, and their presidents who report to me. And you might say that my troops include over 220,000 students, 20,000 faculty, and 80,000 healthcare professionals. In my old job, I had to respect the autonomy and the authority of the men and women reporting to me and give them the latitude they needed to do the job. At the same time, it was my job to make sure everybody was moving in the same direction. And that same balancing act applies in my new job. As Chancellor, I have 14 presidents, all of whom know their jobs much better than I ever will. So I need to allow them to pursue their own vision of what's best for their institutions. But I also need to be sure that they understand that the mission of the UT system isn't about any individual institution. It's about Texas. It's about making sure we are leveraging our size, our scale, our talent, and diversity to improve the human condition for every man, woman, and child in every town and every city in the state of Texas. As a leader, my job is to ask, how do we take these 14 phenomenal institutions and get them all pulling in the same direction for the good of the state, for the nation, and the world? And one thing I learned in the military is that in a fast-changing environment, nothing big or nothing important is accomplished without collaboration. I believe the lesson applies equally to higher education or any other field of endeavor. When I first joined the SEALs, we were in the middle of the Cold War. The military was a very hierarchical organization. Orders came from the top down and people did as they were told. 40 years later, we all know that a top-down approach doesn't engender creativity, boldness, or teamwork. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the military began what we referred to as a revolution in military affairs. We began to understand the need to build tactical and operational teams that work together to accomplish difficult missions. The terrible tragedy of 9/11 and the ensuing conflict against an unconventional enemy showed us that we needed to adapt even more. The enemy we faced in Iraq and Afghanistan, Africa, and Asia was dispersed, complex, local, regional, and global. They used technology and social media and global transportation. Al-Qaeda presented tactical and operational problems that our special operations forces had never seen before. It quickly became clear that to succeed on the battlefield of Iraq and Afghanistan, we were going to have to adapt and adapt quickly. We were going to have to tap into the intellect, creativity, and boldness of every soldier in our service. So we built a flat chain of command that empowered the leaders below us. We reduced the bureaucracy to speed decision-making. We communicated constantly so everyone understood the commander's intent and the strategic direction in which we were heading. We collaborated in ways that had never been done before in the history of special operations. My old boss, General Stan McChrystal, has written a book based on our special operations experience in the war on terrorism. Stan talks about how we built a team of teams so all of our organizations could derive strength from each other and could work together to be successful. This team of teams concept is a formal and informal network of subject matter experts bound together by a common mission. It's a network that uses technology to partner in ways that seemed inconceivable just years before. It's a network brought together through operational incentives, bottom-up desire, and top-down support to solve the most complex problems facing our nation. I believe this concept of the team of teams was probably the single most valuable organizational change in the history of the U.S. military. We used our size, our talent, and our operational diversity to achieve an unparalleled level of collaboration. The SEALs were working with the Army Green Berets, the Green Berets were working with conventional infantry, the infantry was working with the naval aviators, the pilots and crews were working with the logisticians. We were all working with the intelligence and law enforcement communities on the ground, dispersed around the globe. Every day, we would talk and talk and talk, and we found solutions at speeds unheard of in the past. We often looked at the networks we built as a reflection of Metcalfe's law. It was developed by Robert Metcalfe, and the law demonstrates how the addition of one single node in a telecommunications network increases the power of that network, not by a factor of one, but exponentially. Now, while the law was designed for telecommunications, we found that it worked equally well in human networks, as long as the additional person relayed as much information as they received. Interestingly enough, when I first read about Robert Metcalfe, I assumed he was some guy that lived about 100 years ago and had long since passed, only to find out that Bob Metcalfe works here at UT Austin, and one of our great professors. As he has pointed out, he is still alive and well and making great contributions. But in other words, the idea behind Metcalfe's law was you had to contribute your ideas, not just listen. That nature of the exponential increase had to do with everybody providing ideas. So just traveling around the world reinforced what my parents taught me about the power of education. Fighting a new kind of enemy taught me about the necessity of adaptation and collaboration. When I joined the UT system 2 years ago, I was fascinated by its diversity and its depth of talent. From public health to performing arts, psychology to cybersecurity, literature to law, whether we're fighting cancer or unlocking the mysteries of the universe, UT institutions are leaders in so many areas of research, education, and healthcare. And yet, it's clear that the world is changing at a pace unlike anything we've seen before. And any organization that fails to adapt to the changing environment will not serve its citizens well. So I knew we had to adapt, and we are adapting. Without compromising the autonomy of our individual institutions, we are, as a system, applying a collaborative approach to some of society's toughest problems. So let me give you a couple of quick examples. First, I think you would all agree that brain health, which encompasses everything from Alzheimer's to depression to concussions to addiction, is a matter of urgent concern for just about everybody. Across our 14 institutions, we have some of the best scientists and researchers alive focused on the neurosciences. We believe we have an opportunity and a duty to lead a revolution in brain health. And we think we can do that by leveraging and connecting all the cutting-edge science that's taking place across the UT institutions. We need to drive collaboration, incentivize partnerships, and require scientific and clinical cooperation. Second, if there's an issue that keeps people up at night more than brain health, it's probably national security. Today's threats are so varied, complex, and serious, they are crying out for the brightest minds to convene and collaborate in search of solutions. Here, too, UT institutions have great minds thinking and working on a wide range of national security issues. So, as with brain health, we have set out to build a network that connects all the great work being done across the UT institutions. We want to foster more discussion and elevate great ideas and perspectives to national prominence. We want people to always be asking, what does Texas think? What does Texas think about brain health? What does Texas think about national security? What does Texas think about the tough issues that are out there? In these and other areas, we are once again leveraging our size, our talent, and our diversity. We're driving collaboration and turning our 14 institutions into this team of teams in order to maximize our contribution to society and the world at large. That said, we will never lose sight of the fact that putting our young people on a track to a good education and a bright future is job one. Let me say that again. Putting students on a path to a good education and a bright future is job number one, period. And here in Texas, we need to recognize that our state is well below average when it comes to the percentage of our young people who earn college degrees. And this is just the harsh truth. And it doesn't bode well for our state's economic competitiveness. More important, it doesn't bode well for all the folks trying to make their way in this economy. An economy where the gulf between those doing well and those struggling to make it seems to grow wider every day. When I became chancellor, I was surprised and quite honestly unhappy when I saw the 4- and 6-year graduation rates at our institutions. When I expressed my unhappiness, I heard a lot of explanations. Changing demographics, students who aren't prepared for the rigors of college, first-generation kids who don't come from a college-going culture, low-income students who have to hold down a job while pursuing their degrees. And I said, okay, I got it. I understand the problem now. What are we going to do to fix it? I have made it abundantly clear to my university presidents that when a young man or woman struggles, sweats, beats the odds, and makes it to one of our universities, and then is unable to graduate in a timely manner, it's we, not the students, who have failed. So across the UT system, we are tackling this challenge with an unprecedented level of urgency. Leaders from all of our institutions are coming together. I have challenged them to overturn orthodoxies, take risk, and most of all, collaborate and learn from each other. We haven't charted the course yet, but we know where we want to go. No student dropping out because of finances. No student giving up on their education because they believe they don't belong. And every student at every UT system institution receiving advice and counsel they need to forge an achievable pathway to a degree. Student success will always be job one for our universities. But we will fail if our plan doesn't include pre-K through 12, the pre-K through 12 community. For too long, there's been too much finger pointing and not enough effective collaboration between higher ed and pre-K through 12. Well, we intend to fix that. In late 2015, we announced what we call the Texas Prospect Initiative. This vision is to work with the school districts, the civic leaders, and the legislatures, community colleges, and any other interested party who wants to become more actively engaged in pre-K through 12. And if that doesn't sound very specific, to some degree that's by design, because we know a lot of phenomenal educators are already working this issue, and without their input, we would be doomed to fail. So we've been meeting with education groups all over the states, as well as the deans of colleges of education. We're trying to identify where we can use our scale and our size to make the biggest impact to support teachers, counselors, administrators, and of course the students. We want the UT system to have a presence you can feel in every district in the state. Not because we have the answers, just the opposite. Because we know that we, and by we, I mean the state's entire public education system, we can and we must do better. Just like in the military, having individual silos of excellence just isn't enough. The challenge is too big, too complex, and too important. If I've learned anything over the years, it's that the higher the stakes, the more important it is to collaborate. But before I wrap up my remarks, I want to take just a few minutes and talk about some of the broader responsibilities we have to our students, about the values we are instilling in them either tacitly or deliberately. I ask that you consider what I call the 3 Ds, which again I consider cornerstones of a good education: discovery, debate, and dissent. And let's start with discovery. I strongly believe that students, faculty, and researchers should be relentless in their pursuit of new ideas. They should think critically, ask the tough questions, shine light in dark corners, challenge authority, conventional wisdom, each other, and themselves. A university campus ought to be a place where people are mad, where some people are mad, some are frustrated, but all are alive with curiosity. But of course, the further you push the bounds of discovery, the more you challenge the status quo. And the more you challenge the status quo, the more disagreement you're going to have with those around you. Which brings me to the second D, debate. I fear the art of debate on campus, and certainly in society as a whole, is in decline. So, it is more important than ever that our students learn how to argue their positions in a reasonable, well thought out, persuasive, and civil manner. If not for society, then for the reality that they will need that skill as they negotiate their way through their lives and their careers. Finally, and perhaps most important, we need to teach our young people how to act when their argument doesn't carry the day. Leading me to the third D, dissent. I want our campuses to be a place where students are able to appropriately and respectfully express disagreement without repercussions. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Effective leaders understand that dissent doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger. Great ideas aren't born from consensus. More often than not, dissent is the first step down the path to innovations, breakthroughs, and solutions. Where would the nation be without the suffragettes, the civil rights marches, or the anti-war protests? Stifling dissent is the worst thing an academic institution can do. But we must teach those who dissent to do so peacefully, lawfully, and constructively. We must teach them to recognize that peaceful dissent is one of the great freedoms of this nation. It should be exercised often, but never abused in the name of progress. The goal of the 3 Ds, as I see it, is to help cultivate men and women who are highly educated, well-informed, mature, and principled. Men and women who are able to argue and stand by their convictions, but are also able to listen and learn from the perspective of others. As Chancellor, part of my job is to make sure my presidents are creating an environment where these things can happen, where teachers can teach and students can learn, where different points of view are more than welcome, they are sought out, where when a student leaves, she or he leaves with a more valuable credential. The good news is, I am confident that across most of our 14 institutions, or actually all of our 14 institutions, the presidents are working hard to instill these qualities in the students and the faculties. But the students will leave with a deeper understanding of both their rights and responsibilities as an American. The world of higher education, and education generally, will always reflect the world as a whole, as it absolutely should. But we should be more than a mirror. We should be a shining example of our hope and expectations for the next generation. I want to thank SouthBySouthwest.ed again for inviting me today. It has really been an honor to share a few thoughts with you. And I know I speak for all those with the UT system, all of my colleagues, in saying how much and how deeply we appreciate all of your effort. And we stand ready to help. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to open it up for some questions. So, thank you. Okay, so I'm told Slido, that you can use Slido for those of you that know how to do that. I would like to stand up here and give you a tutorial on that, but that's probably not going to happen. Having said that, if you want to come to the microphone, I'm happy to take your questions that way too. So I'm looking down here at Slido. So I think this is the question. Giving every Texas student the opportunity for a great education is the goal of public education. What can we do to ensure that our state supports our schools? It's a great question. I mean, obviously we're in the middle of the legislative session. And I will tell you that this governor, as you know, is a great higher education governor. And I am convinced as I walk around and talk to the members of the legislature that they are actually really committed to higher education. But like everything else, there are competing interests. So I think my responsibility, the chancellor's responsibility, the president's responsibility, the faculty, the people's responsibility is to talk to your legislators, to tell them how much and how valuable not only higher ed, but pre-K through 12 and all of public education is. They need to understand that if we want to continue to build the economic engine, continue to build the talent in Texas, then we will certainly need the state support to do that. Yes, sir. Please come up to the mic.
You began your remarks about children in Afghanistan.
Right.
Physical threat as life in the bed.
Right.
What's happening in this country is we really seem to be away from the idea of it public good. See the Texas legislature as a part of your teams, yet you think that it would be important to change the.
Yeah, one, I absolutely see the legislature as part of the team of teams. Again, we have meetings on a daily basis throughout the course of the session to kind of garner their support for key issues. So there's no question they are part of this team as well. I think your point about student debt is one that we've got to get the facts clear. So let me give you a data point. University of Texas, you go to any school in the state of the university or within the University of Texas system, the average debt after 4 years is about $22,000. That is less than the price of a small car, and that doesn't depreciate over time. So you hear these numbers like, you know, there's $1 trillion in student debt out there, which there no doubt that there is. But the kids going to our schools here in Texas, it is the best bargain going. The flagship university is about $10,000 a year. Now again, you add on room and board, but at the end of the day, most of these students go, and about 60% of them get some sort of grants or scholarship. So it is the best bargain going. We've got to be careful about telling kids that school is too expensive. I think this is a narrative, and it's important for me. And everywhere I go, I tell folks, hey, you know, talk to me about your kids and how much debt they had. And invariably, the parents come back and they say, actually, my kid didn't have a lot of debt, or the kid might say, well, I had $20,000 worth of debt after 4 years. But that's not just tuition, books, and fees. That is the totality of their debt, room and board, and all of that. Because again, there is a lot of money out there if the students know where to go. So now again, private education, that's a whole different matter. My daughter and my son went to a private school. I know how expensive that can be. But I got to tell you, here in the state of Texas, I think it's a doggone good bargain for the money. Thank you. Okay, how can community colleges better support transferability into the UT system? Community colleges often have ill-prepared students tackling development ed curriculum. Great question. So again, part of our approach here is we are working with the community colleges. Here in Austin, we're working with ACC, but each one of our institutions, frankly, has a pretty good relationship with their local community college, with their local independent school district. This issue of transferability, is what we refer to it, is a critically important issue. Making sure that if you take classes at ACC, are they in fact going to transfer and go towards your degree at UT Austin or UT San Antonio or wherever you might go. And so we have these affiliation agreements, these transfer agreements with almost all the community colleges. And this is something we continue to look at every year to make sure that we are partnering with the community colleges, because this is a tremendous feeder for all of our schools. And what we find is kids that go to community colleges and really get through those first 2 years, their chance of getting into a UT Austin or some of our other institutions have increased exponentially. They're great schools within the community colleges, and we're strong supporters of them. Start at the microphone.
Hi, my name is Peter. I teach at a small school of about 630 students, not nearly as complex as the system you're describing.
Oh,
unless you're talking about the adolescent mind,
yeah.
It's really complex. I read Team of Teams last year,
Yep.
really enjoyed it, found it a compelling argument. The 2 principles of decision making
Right.
and shared really terrific. And I'm wondering one of 2 questions.
Sure.
One, what are some concrete ways in which you've applied those principles at UT and
You
the UT
bet.
system? Or more specifically and more interesting to me is, can those decisions or tolerance does that kind of that meant for the institution, so you're seeing that happen?
Yeah, great question. So for those of you that haven't read Team of Teams, again, it's really about our special operations experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting a very complex enemy. And as I mentioned in my remarks, it was really about figuring out how do we partner with folks we'd never partnered with before. When I took over command of the special operation unit that Stan McChrystal had, I went forward to Iraq and Afghanistan, and again, he had begun to build this incredible network, and then we continued to build it while I was there. I did 6 video teleconferences a day in order that we all had this kind of shared vision of the direction we were heading. So on those video teleconferences, I was in a position to hear what the young sergeant thought, who was at a forward operating base out in the middle of nowhere. I was able to hear what the Joint Chiefs of Staff were thinking in Washington, D.C. We would have, in some cases, 80 different components on our video teleconferences in addition to the people that were there. So I took this concept of communicating to the world of academia. So when I got here, very soon after I got here, we started a once-a-week video teleconference with the presidents. I do it once a week with the academic presidents and once a week with the healthcare presidents. And admittedly, it was pretty interesting on the very first video teleconference we did. My screen is a Hollywood Square sort of thing, so I can see them all up there. And you could tell this was, for a lot of them, the first time that they had been on kind of an interactive video teleconference. So, we had some little protocols we had to go through, little things like, mute your mic, make sure you don't look like you're 1,000 yards away. But that was important. But so what happens now, and this the point I'm getting to, what we do now is this weekly video teleconference we do, the presidents are almost always all there. It's either them or their provost, and we talk through issues. And so we have flattened, if you will, the chain of command so that, one, I'm hearing from the presidents on a weekly basis about what their concerns are. And conversely, I'm in a position to tell them kind of, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's where we're going, what do you think? Get their input. Because again, I've only been here in higher ed for 2 years. So I am constantly drawing on the insights of the presidents. And then, of course, we are doing this in a lot of other ways across the system on sometimes a little bit more of a personal basis. But this idea of the video teleconference was new in terms of pulling the leadership together. So while I don't have to do 6 a day, it is still something that has allowed us to, again, flatten the chain of command, if you will, the hierarchy. Me hear from the presidents and the presidents hear from me. And frankly, when we have tough issues, which we had when I first got here, we had a very tough issue that had to do with one of our software programs that was part of all the universities. Once a week for a year, we had a video teleconference with all the presidents and with their communications people until we knocked down this problem. And that's what you had to do. You had to communicate and work that way. So that was very helpful. Let me go back to here, and then, ma'am, I'll get you here. So what can you share about the trend for more entrepreneurship curriculum across the colleges versus just in the business school? You know, this is interesting. And I think this is a fabulous trend that I am seeing is particularly, the millennials, they kind of want to come in, they want to be entrepreneurs. And so you see popping up almost organically at all of our universities, these entrepreneur institutes, these groups of entrepreneurs that get together informally, kind of back to the formal and the informal piece. They're getting together in an informal manner, creating, traction on what they're trying to work on. It's everything from healthcare to new technology, to music, to everything. You look here in Austin, we have the Capital Factory, which has brought together a lot of great entrepreneurs, and the students here at UT Austin certainly know that that's a resource available to them. So it's not just in the business school anymore in terms of where these entrepreneur groups focus. I think they're a little bit of everywhere. Are they as institutionalized as well as in the business schools? Probably not. But having said that, they are, again, popping up organically everywhere we go. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Leslie, and I am a retired special ed public school teacher. I privately tutor students, and one of them that I have right now, I'll use him as a case in point for my question. He is a student with autism, and he cannot, for the life of him, he will not be able to do math. But, however, he excels tremendously in other areas. So is there any consideration being done, especially with the growing number of students who are being identified in the autism spectrum, to relinquish that barrier to secondary education? Like, he's not going to be able to pass an SAT or an ACT.
Well, I actually have one of my family members, one of my nephews who is autistic, so I'm very familiar with the difficulties of trying to raise autistic children. But I think your point is a very good one. And again, this kind of more starts on the pre-K through 12 side. So I'm not sure I'm in a position to talk about it on the higher ed side. But one of the things that I think we have to recognize, and this gets back to what I refer to as precision education. We know now, because again, recognize my enterprise is not only 8 academic institutions, it's 6 healthcare institutions. And certainly at a place like MD Anderson and UT Health, we're looking at precision medicine. We recognize that everybody here, if you have a cancer, you can't just, kind of firebomb the tumor anymore. You have to understand down to the DNA and the genomes how your precision medicine is going to be different than my precision medicine. I think the same thing needs to occur in education. I don't know how we do it. It's a complicated issue. But back to the, young man or woman that might have autism, and I can tell you from, my nephews, yes, there are areas where they don't do well at all. But then there are areas where they are just flat out brilliant. So how do we put ourselves in a position to make sure that we don't leave those kids behind? I don't know, to be honest with you. We're not certainly there yet in the pre-K through 12 area, but God bless the teachers and the faculty that are working hard to take care of those kids, because that is vitally, vitally important. Let me look down here. What's the most important aspect of building a team that is focused on a shared vision? I think it's just that. You have to create a shared vision. You have to communicate what that vision is. People need to understand kind of the direction you're going. And if you can't do that, then it's going to be hard to move things forward. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jane Kirschman. I'm the mother of 2 Longhorns and a Bob. And I'm about to fill out my 14th and FAFSA.
Yeah.
I wondered, should have done it already. Oh well. And I was wondering what resources to help students access the resources is not a
Right.
straightforward path
Right.
at all. And particularly for students who are the first ones to go to college, or who
Right.
for whom their family's English is not a first. What kind of resources for every high school has a straightforward path?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll go back to my earlier remarks. This thing that we're looking at both on the student success side and the Texas Prospect Initiative, one of the things we clearly found was we have got to get counseling and advising down to the high school level so that students know not just about how to fill out their FAFSA forms, but also to understand what their paths are going to look like when they come to college. And at UT, we have what's called Seek UT, SEEK-UT. If you go to Seek UT and you're a parent and you say, my son or daughter wants to be an anthropologist, great. Well, let me tell you what it's going to take to be an anthropologist. They're going to have to take these courses. And oh, by the way, here's what they're going to make when they get out of school based on the workforce data we've done. And here's how much they're going to make 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and 15 years from now, because we've been able to chart it, I think, as far out as 15 years. But, you know, these are important decisions that a parent needs to sit down with their child and say, okay, if you want to be an anthropologist, here's what it's going to be. If you want to be an engineer at the Cockrell School of Engineering or go to UT Dallas, here's what your pathway is going to be. And so when you look at the FAFSA form and you look at also the required grants that are out there, because again, we need to be in a position to tell you, well, if your student needs to get a Pell Grant or a Texas grant, or if they're a veteran, they can get a Hazelwood exemption. You know, if you go to Seek UT, you will find a lot of this information. But also back to this relationship between the University of Texas system and the pre-K through 12. This is an area where we have got to tighten this up. And again, we're working with community colleges, we are working with the ISDs to say, let's figure out a way so when a counselor at a high school has a young man or woman that wants to go to a UT institution, how do we make sure that they have all of the requisite understanding about how to fill out the FAFSA, what they're going to make, what the courses they're going to take. We have those resources. We don't have them plentiful enough right now to be able to cover down on all the ISDs. So a lot of this is educating the high school counselors on how best to do this. I served in the 4th POG under your command. Well, thank you. Who put that question out there? Somebody gonna? Oh, way in the back. Thanks very much. So how do performing and fine arts fit into your educational vision? The 4th POG is the Psychological Operations Group. Tremendous, great warriors that really did a lot for us everywhere we went in combat. So thanks for your service. Yeah, I'm a journalism major. And I will tell you, I have a great affinity for the liberal arts for a whole number of reasons. One of the things we found, certainly again in my time in the military, is it is great to have engineers and folks that have these great technical STEM skills. Nothing more important, nothing more marketable in today's environment. But they also need the critical thinking skills. And I think we need to understand that if you want to be a well-rounded person, you have to have both the technical piece of this, you have to also have this sense of the fine arts and a more liberal, in the classic sense of the word, education. And so I know that all of our presidents are working hard to ensure that those folks coming into the STEM fields or in the business fields have got a little bit broader approach to life in general. Yes, sir.
Yes. First of all, I've got a son at UNT in first year music.
Great.
He had the choice of Berkeley or UNT.
Yeah, good.
And he chose UNT, so you gave me a pay raise.
Yeah.
So it is a good deal. But one of the questions I have, so he's coming back sharing his classwork, and there's still a lot of the classwork which is memorizing content.
Sure.
And not being given kind of the context for the why are we studying this. So where do you see the battleship you're navigating, shifting from what I would call the Gutenberg model of learning to the Google world and reality of collaborative, project-based learning, and understanding the why. Why are we studying this anyway?
Yeah, so I can't speak for UNT. That's actually not within the UT system, but let me kind of get to your broader question. So we've got actually a lot of, I think, incredibly innovative things going on. We have what we refer to as the Institute for Transformational Learning, ITL. And ITL is a competency-based approach to education. And it really kind of turns the classic model, the Gutenberg model, if you will, a little bit on its head, not entirely. So this isn't about just, giant MOOCs and those sort of things. It is about kind of this hybrid approach that puts kids in a position to learn at their own pace. It is very visual, it is very graphic. We have gamified the content, and this is important for the young students coming in. They understand the nature of gaming, and by gamifying the content, what I mean by that is kids today actually respond well to games that give them badges and show that their progress is occurring. And it's not only that, it is an interactive approach, and then there's a lot of touch points from the faculty. So we have started this down at the Rio Grande Valley. We are working on programs at UT San Antonio and UT Health and MD Anderson in Houston. The question is, we don't know how scalable it is yet, because it does require a lot of touch points, and it requires an initial investment. And so what we're trying to find out as we begin to approach this is whether or not the investment and the touch points are scalable to a much larger degree. But the other thing I'd offer to you is President Greg Finvez, his strategic vision for the University of Texas at Austin is about kind of reframing and kind of defining the 21st century curriculum, as he refers to it. And so I think all of our presidents, I can tell you all the presidents understand that the old pedagogies probably don't work on this generation, and we need to figure out ways to ensure that they are learning to the best of their ability. Okay, the next question is, in light of recent events, what is being done to make UT schools safer? Great question. So in light of the incredible tragedy we had here at UT Austin last year, as you know, UT Austin brought in the Department of Public Safety. They did a complete review of the campus to make sure that we had all where the proper lighting was. We had more panic bars where we needed to. There's been a complete assessment done of UT Austin, and the other campuses are beginning to do the same thing. We want to make sure we have absolutely the safest campuses we can provide. No campus is risk-free. We can never get to that point where we can 100% guarantee your safety. But I got to tell you, the presidents, myself, we are absolutely committed to making the campuses as safe as we possibly can. Yes, ma'am.
About how you're working.
Yeah. You bet. Oh, great question. So I have Dr. Stephanie Huey, who works at the UT System Administration. She really is my data guru. And so when I talked about CQT earlier, so Dr. Huey has put this data together on CQT based on workforce data and Social Security data and a lot of other things that she's been able to pull in. So what we are doing across the institutions is just that. We are collecting data and aggregating the data in a fashion that really gives us a better appreciation for the impact, not just at a UT Austin or a UT Dallas, but what's the impact on the system writ large. And that is, again, this takes a number of people that understand where to go to get the data, to make sure that the data is reliable data, that they can peer review the data if they need to make sure that it is consistent and accurate. But at the end of the day, we're beginning to get some great trends that then allows us to focus our efforts to make sure that whatever we're doing systemically is moving towards solving a problem that this data is reflected. What can be done to increase the number of minority students at UT schools, particularly at your flagship school? Again, great question. I will tell you, again, we are very much dedicated to increasing the number of minority students at UT Austin and frankly everywhere. But let me tell you what we have done that I'm hoping over time will make a big difference for us. Last year, when we implemented the beginning of our quantum leaps, we refer to it, we did what we euphemistically recall the Rooney Rule. So for those of you that might follow the National Football League, Art Rooney, who was the president and CEO of the Pittsburgh Steelers many years ago, maybe 20 years ago or so, implemented the Rooney Rule because what we found was 3/4 of the National Football League was African American, but 80–90% of the head football coaches were white. And what was happening was a lot of the great candidates never made it to the final interview. So we have initiated what we refer to now as the Opportunity Rule, and we make sure that if it is a dean or above, and that is both in the academic and the respective healthcare institutions. If it's dean or above, then before we make a final decision, there will be a female and an underrepresented minority in the final interview. And why is that important? Well, one of the things I've found, and I think it's what the National Football League realized, but one of the things I've found in my 2 years here is that the skills you need to be a dean and a provost and many times a president are not always the same skills you need to be a great faculty member. So sometimes you look at somebody's resume and you may say, well, how many articles have they written? How many books have they published? Where are they in the academic spectrum? And if that's all you take, you may miss a great talent that you wouldn't see unless you brought them in to the last interview. And when you had a chance to talk to them and you realize that, wow, they've got great interpersonal skills, and I can sense the energy from them. And these are important qualities that I think we were missing in the past. So again, we put this into effect over a year ago, and every dean or above, so every president, every provost, every dean across every college, across every institution has to follow the opportunity rule. And what we're going to find, kind of back to this question here, is we are doing both bottom-up and top-down look at this. So we are actively going out trying to recruit minority students. But I'm convinced if we also take a top-down approach, and by that, if over time, and it will take time, we begin to change the makeup of our faculty so that the young African-American student looks up and sees, the dean of college X is African-American or Hispanic, or a female or another underrepresented minority, there's a higher possibility that they're going to come to our institution. Again, will this take time? You bet it will. But again, we've got both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. All right, let me see how we're doing. We've got another couple here. So, how will the UT system adapt and collaborate on the tenure process? For instance, mentorship is key for student success. Could this ever be incorporated into it? Great question, very timely question, I might add. In fact, I was talking to Dr. Steve Leslie today, who is the Executive Vice Chair for my academic affairs, and we were talking about this exact subject and the need for faculty to be more engaged in the mentorship and the advising of students. And so we're trying to figure out how best to do that. I don't have the answers right now, but it is something that we recognize needs to be done. One, we think it will improve, again, the 4-year and 6-year graduation rates, in addition to making sure that we've got better faculty-student engagement. Okay, next one. Can you speak to how your vision for education in Texas will support and leverage immigrant students and families given the national focus on immigration? Well, for those that might have followed my very, very short tenure in this job, even before I took the job, I was in support of the Dreamers. And I hadn't even actually walked into the office. I was asked early on, what do you think about the Dreamers and what will your position be? And I just made sure people understood. Look, my job is going to be to educate students. If a student has, come to this great country and has gone through the Texas public school system and they're trying to get into one of our universities, then I am going to welcome them. We need, as many Dreamers as we can find. We want to make sure that we are bringing the very best and brightest talent from all around the world. So this is, again, my responsibility is to educate, the young and the old alike, whoever wants an education. And so we welcome folks from anywhere and everywhere. Given the divisive political climate in the U.S., how is UT promoting inclusivity for its students while respecting a wide range of political and social beliefs? This gets back to kind of my tail end discussion there. I think this is something we have to work on. Back to this idea that we want students to be able to debate their positions. This is what great universities do. They debate the hard issues, but students need to learn how to do that. Faculty need to help them understand, how do you carry on a debate in a way that is civil, that really kind of gets your point across? And then again, back to this idea that if for whatever reason you're unable to make your point and you feel that the next step really is this kind of freedom of expression, freedom of dissent, then you need to know how to do that and do that lawfully and peacefully as well. So these are things I think that we need to continue to work hard on. If we do this, then I think the inclusivity will take care of itself, because people will listen for the other point of view. They will have to argue their point of view against the other point of view. And a lot of times when you do that in a civil manner, you begin to have a better appreciation for the other point of view. So this is an important dialogue, I think, that needs to continue to happen at all of our system institutions. How do you balance collaboration with the need to make decisions quickly? Well, I mean, one of the things I think people think in the military that, you know, we see something and we make a quick decision and we kind of move out. Again, I talked earlier about in my remarks that really the military is not a lot different than higher education from the standpoint, you know, when I was a commander, I'm not a fighter pilot, but I had a fighter pilot on my staff. I'm not a helicopter pilot, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an infantryman, an army, but they were all on my staff. And so you listen to them, you learn from them, you get their perspectives, their insights, which is really no different than what I do here. I'm not a lawyer, but I have lawyers. I'm not a doctor, but I have doctors. I haven't spent time in higher ed, but I have former presidents and provosts. So you have to listen to them, and you really have to take that input. But having said that, at some point in time, you have to make a decision. And that's what I've been doing most of my adult life, is taking the input, you get the facts as best you can, but you don't want to continue to lead by committee, because I think if you do that, then one, maybe you never get to a decision that needs to be made. You as the leader have got to accept responsibility. And I think sometimes we tend to want to diffuse the responsibility. It's my responsibility. At the end of the day, the decisions that come down from the UT system are going to be mine. But I am always going to take the input of the people that are on my staff. And again, at some point in time, it is about collaboration, not just on my staff, but obviously I talk about these video teleconferences I do. I talk about, you know, I mean, I am out and about across Texas on a routine basis. So I listen, I take the input, and then eventually you make the best decision you can. And the final question, can you talk about how you would like libraries to innovate as partners in the teaching and research mission of your universities? Well, I will have to admit, I'm still a little old school. My wife loves her Kindle. I'm still a guy that's got to have the paper. But having said that, I come to the flagship campus quite often. And the old library, of course, has become a learning center. And it is fascinating to see, again, for me, as an old guy, to see how the young students learn. They are all on their computers, or they are in little collaborative cohorts where they're talking amongst each other. We have whiteboards up, so you see them in the middle of a large group of people on their computers, downloading information, whiteboarding. I mean, this is a very interactive approach to learning. I think it's a fabulous approach. So I think we've got to encourage more and more of our libraries to put more and more of our information online. We've got to make sure the search engines are out there so that kids can very quickly, not just about what is current relevant, but I love to go walk through the stacks. And you pull some book that was written in 1806. Well, that may not be digitized and somewhere that is easily accessible, but there could be some very valuable information in that. So I think we need to continue to go through all the digitization we can, because the information that's in the libraries is just remarkable. But again, what I like about the libraries today is that they have brought this kind of interactive approach to education that I think is just fabulous. What are you doing with Austin ISD to help collaborate education in K-12? So with Austin ISD, I talked about, or maybe I didn't. Again, we have this collaborative effort work going on dual credit right now. We've created this dual credit task force. The dual credit task force will be working with the Texas Education Association, our agency, with the coordinating board. We're going to work with the independent school districts. We're just kind of getting this task force rolling, but we are going to make sure that we are, again, tied into the ISDs, obviously here in Austin, but where all of our institutions are. So we have an understanding of, again, how the dual credit is impacting the kids in high school, and whether or not that dual credit is a good pathway towards, towards our higher ed degrees. And that looks like I am out of questions. Any more questions? Well, again, thank you all very much for having me here today, and thanks for everything you do for education. Thanks.